You're on the Six Screens Network, earning the reputation of giving all the right ingredients, uninhibited, in exposing the hard, cold facts about the Watchtower Society. Disney.
Well, there we have it. And boy, I can see a lot of people coming into the program already. Well, my name is Rick Farron. I'm up here in Massachusetts, and I'm at the control panel of the Six Screens. And this is where all the programs originate from. And boy, are we so glad to have so many programs on our network. We're running about dozen different programs right now, and we're proud of all the people of former Jehovah's Witnesses that do these programs. They put a lot of work and effort into it, and we are so glad to have them with us. Well, we have a program right now. It's called Former Jehovah's Witnesses Share Their Story of Being in the Watchtower Organization. Well, I'm sure if you were one of Jehovah's Witnesses, you got a story to tell too. We all do. We've all been touched, as we say, by the tentacles of the Watchtower. Well, we have got Anne Marie. She's a former Jehovah's Witness. She's coming in from California, and she's going to be the host of the program. Hello, Anne Marie.
Hello, my brother Rick. Happy Six Screen Sunday.
Well, it is a happy Sunday. I'll tell you what it is, Anne Marie, and I know I say it. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I feel good. I really feel good, and you do too, I can tell. And we got a really peppy audience out there today. I couldn't believe it. The first program we had there, the Knowing God program, boy, lots of participation, lots of people coming through. So we see the dynamics are changing here on Sunday, which is good. Now, we have a man. He's a former Jehovah's Witness. He listens into the Six Screens, and his name is Aaron. And why don't you say hello to Aaron, Anne Marie?
Well, hello, Aaron, and I'm so glad you're there. Looking forward to hearing your testimony. How are you feeling?
Feeling great. Happy to be here.
Oh, I am as well. What were you saying, my brother Rick?
Well, I'm just saying that I like this man, Aaron. I really, really do. He doesn't seem to be rocked. Yeah, Aaron, you're a very strong person. I can tell. In fact, we talked last week when you came on the Six Screens, and yeah, I like the way you're very strong. You're very much not swayed by this organization that could have really hurt you. But we want to hear your story, so I'm going to leave you with Anne Marie, and I'm here if you need me, Anne Marie.
Well, I always thank you for that. You're always so supportive and on the ball. Thank you so much, my brother. I want to welcome everyone in to the show today. Happy Six Screen Sunday to everyone. We only have it twice a month. Today is April 7, 2024, and this show is where we get to come on, and if we're lucky, we get somebody like Aaron who's willing to tell their personal story of what it was like to be in the Watchtower organization, what it was like to get out and how they're doing now. This is the show called Ex-Jehovah's Witnesses Share Their Watchtower Story. And today we are blessed to have an ex-Watchtowerite named Aaron. Hello, Aaron. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm happy. I'm happy you're here. Because I talk to a lot of people on Reddit, and I talk to a lot of ex-JWs and those that have got out. And I don't care what we have in common, Aaron. And I'm sure you know, and I agree, that no matter what we have in common with each other, we still walk our path alone. And it is a very lonely, difficult journey to go through Watchtower, to realize I can't do this anymore, and to figure out how in the world you're getting out and how to deal with the punishment. There's always punishment. There's always a high price to pay. So, Aaron, would you like me to ask you questions, or do you feel more comfortable everybody just leaving you alone and just letting you tell your story in your own way? How's that? What would you like?
Well, I don't mind doing it, answering questions. That would be fine.
Okay, but what would you prefer? for me, it's easier just to say, well, this is how it started for me, and then this, and then that. So what would you prefer? What's more comfortable for
I think I'll just give a, condensed version of the important events that I think, everybody would benefit from, or just especially anyone who, might be on the fence, leaving the organization or whatever. They might benefit from hearing a not maybe typical, but, maybe a little bit out of the ordinary story. I don't know. So, yeah, I can tell it. Yeah.
You just go ahead, and if you don't mind, my brother, if I have a clarifying question I feel needs to be asked, will you forgive me and let me do that? And I will try to be brief and not interrupt your flow.
Sure. Sounds great.
The floor is yours, my brother.
All right. Well, I hope everybody's doing good on this fine Sunday. I guess I'll start by basically saying that I was I guess you would call third generation born in, because my parents were witnesses and my grandmothers were witnesses. But most of the people on my mom's side are witnesses. I'd say more so than on my dad's side. So my grandmother on my mother's side got the so-called truth when she was I think when my mom and uncles were pretty young. I want to say that was in the mid-50s, because they bought a farm in Maryland in the late 40s, and my grandmother had married my grandfather, who was significantly older than her, when she was 15. And I specifically remember when my grandmother was alive, and my mother's side was alive, she said at one point that she never graduated high school. And I would ask her, I said, well, how come you never graduated? And she said, I didn't graduate, I married. That was her words. So that's what, people did back then. And I guess she didn't end up having my uncle, her oldest child, until, obviously, I think until she was over 18. But she died. My grandmother died in 2018, I believe. And that was the very last time that I actually stepped inside of a Kingdom Hall. Just a little point there to make note of. But I actually left the organization in 2006. So as far as my dad's side, I don't really remember how long she had been a witness, but it was for many decades. She died when she was 92, and that was 14 years ago. And unfortunately, she ended up dying 2 months after my dad died. And I feel like, her youngest son dying had something to do with that. But yeah, I don't want to get events too far out of sequence. So I guess I'll just go back to my parents now. So my parents met in I want to say the late 70s, maybe 77, 78, somewhere around there. They got married in 1980. And they were introduced. I'm not exactly sure how, but they were introduced through maybe one of them visited the hall or another hall or something. And I came around in 83, so I'm almost 41 now. And I would say specifically being indoctrinated into this organization from a very young age, it had a severe emotional impact on me. And not only that, but also my mom was mentally ill for many years until around 93. And she claims, or she has claimed, that this organization, and specifically a certain circuit overseer, was instrumental in making her snap out of this mental illness. And the mental illness resulted from, things that happened in her childhood that kind of carried over into when she became an adult. And so in 93, I would have been 9. And when I was up until I was 5 or 6, I had to be babysat. And then my dad would come and pick me up from the babysitter when he got off work, because my mom was, out of the picture, at least for a little while there. So I think that had an impact on me. And my dad, off and on for years, even though he was a witness, ministerial servant for a long time, and then later an elder, and then he was later removed as an elder, and then he became ministerial servant again and an elder again because of his drinking. Essentially, he wasn't like what you would call an alcoholic per se, but he did hide it, a lot of his drinking, from my mother over the years, until she really kind of caught on to it around 97 when I was 14. And that actually had a significant impact on me too, because I hated when he would, let's say, drink a few beers and get high and a little bit high. He was never like knocked down, drag out drunk or nothing like that. And when he had his elders judicial case at the house back in 97, I still remember listening to it from upstairs because I could hear it through the floor, what they were talking about. And what my dad had said was, what we're talking about here is a few bouts of intoxication. That's what he called it. And he said, but I never let it interfere with my spiritual duties or my duty as a father, which for the most part, I would say is true. But it still didn't keep my mom from ratting him out to the other elders and having this, thing happen. So, yeah, I had to deal with all those things as I was coming up. And then I also had to deal with the constant pressure and badgering as I came a little bit older to get baptized. And I'll just be honest, ever since I was old enough to really comprehend spiritual things and things that were in the Bible, my heart was, my mom might say otherwise, but I know myself better than she does. And I would say that my heart was never in this organization, or particularly really the Bible either. But I do still respect the Bible as God's word that was inspired through, Bible writers and that sort of thing. But as far as the organization and the things that the lifestyle that we were being forced to lead, especially for a young person coming up in school and having to deal with all the persecution you would get from having to tell the other kids that you're one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and during a nice, what would otherwise seem like a nice holiday party, etc., that they might have in the school during those times of the year, or maybe a certain movie that we would watch, like a Christmas movie or whatever. I would have to explain to the teacher, look, I'm not allowed to watch this movie. Can I go sit in a library or something like that? And I would feel duty obligated to carry that out because of the indoctrination at a young age.
Yeah.
And I would say all those things had a pretty good impact on me. Now, I mean, it affects different people different ways. I mean, I turned out really good, but it's taken the better part of 20 years for me to really come to terms with everything that happened. And I was a good student in school, but a lot of times, and this is another thing that I had to deal with along with the persecution from the other students and bullying and that sort of thing, that my mom, especially when I was in elementary school and even middle school, there were times when she actually came in and sat in the classroom around, like in the back of the classroom, and what she would call, and this is a quote, observing his classes. And I mean, okay, this was in the 90s and early 2000s, but I can't imagine today with how much more so, things have gotten bad, especially in public schools. If something like this were to happen today, how much impact that might have on today's youngsters. But I mean, I got through it, you know, for the most part. I even remember once when I was in 7th grade that there was one of the kids, his name was his last name was McNally, I think. I forget his first name. He would make fun of certain things about my mom, and that's how I remember she came in to the school once when I was in 7th grade. That might have probably been the last year she did that, because obviously she probably knew and understood that, you know, I didn't like that. But as I got into high school, you know, I went to a trade school, and I did pretty well. I mean, I took plumbing, and I still do plumbing and other construction trades, and I'm a jack of all trades on the side like my dad was. I can do different things than he did, and some things he did that I'm not really good at, but, you know, that's how it is. But I never had to repeat a grade or anything because, you know, I was always stressed with, you know, you need to get your education and you need to do okay in school. I wasn't like a straight A student or nothing, but I was at least glad that I graduated with a diploma, when I was 17, and didn't have to repeat a year or anything. Now, I didn't go to college. I didn't want to go to college, and I don't really think that the organization's stance on that really was the thing that, you know, made me not want to. I feel like it was just the fact that it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of money. You know, I didn't have access to any scholarships or anything like that. So, but you know, that was, and I still up to this day, I still believe that, you know, people don't need to go to college, because I believe that, and this is not the organization's stance on it, it's not for the same reason, but I feel like that college is a scam, especially because when you think about the cost of tuition, does it really pay off? I mean, you have a lot of college graduates that are 50, 100, 150 grand in debt, and they're working at Starbucks. I mean, they're working at Amazon. They're, you know, and then you have another thing, you have the government trying to come in and say, oh, we're going to forgive your student debt, when, you know, a lot of these people don't deserve that to happen, and that falls on the back of the taxpayer. So, and that's why I feel college is a scam, because it's not a free market. Colleges can charge whatever they want because they know the government backs the student loans, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really a giant Ponzi scheme, in my opinion. But going back to the congregations, well, I'm a Delawarean, and I grew up in Delaware. I'm still in Delaware, northern Delaware. We were in 2 or 3 different congregations until I left. But I would say it was when I really started to question whether I wanted to stay in this organization or not, was when I was in high school. And it was pretty much, well, I got a job when I was 16 in the year 2000. That was my first job. And, you know, interacting with people outside of school and the hall and that sort of thing really got me to thinking about things. And this was around the time the internet was becoming more and more popular. So, but there wasn't any, as far as I know, there wasn't really any online activity yet at that time as far as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, maybe there was forums and that sort of thing, but I'm not sure. But really, I decided to leave in 2006 just because I couldn't live this lifestyle anymore. And at the time, I was married to a Jehovah's Witness. I didn't even get into that part yet. When I was 20, I met this girl she was here. She was on a working visa as an au pair, and she lived in Maryland. She was staying with a family there, helping take care of their students. And there were some friends of my mom's that had a get together that knew me, and they invited me, and this girl was there too. So I guess her performance there, she was on a little skit, kind of impressed me. And so we kind of started talking, and she was 4 years older than me. So, I mean, she had some experience. She had already been out of the witnesses at least once, from what I remember. So, but long story short, we ended up getting married within 6 months of meeting each other. And it's quite obvious that even anyone listening, before I even say it, should know the reason for that. It's because of hormones, basically. Not being able to really date people when I was, a teenager really had a severe impact on me too, as far as not being able to really know and understand how to talk to women and get that experience, that necessary experience you need before you take the vital step of marriage to know what you're really looking for. The only thing when you're in the organization like that is like, okay, I got to get married because otherwise we're going to end up committing immorality, and that's a great sin, right? But at this point, looking back, I feel like the best option would have been, because, okay, we didn't go all the way. I don't know how specific I can get on the show, but we did do certain other, sexual acts before we got married, such as oral and that sort of thing, which to me is the same thing as going all the way. And I feel like that's basically, the witnesses would probably agree with that. I'm not sure, but I should have just, done what we had to do and taken the punishment, which we ended up having anyway after we got married, because we were like, a few months in, we're like, we can't keep this a secret anymore. We have to tell somebody. We have to go to the brothers, yada, yada, yada. So we ended up doing that. And I think we didn't get like this fellowship, but we had gotten at least publicly reproved. So she ended up getting her privileges, quote, back before I did. And to be honest, I don't really remember that I ever got mine back. I might have just stopped going to meetings at that point. And this was around 05, 06. And that was the beginning of my journey out. I hadn't researched really that much about the organization's history as far as from Russell's time and into Rutherford's time and all that. And 1914, 1925, 1975. I hadn't researched any of that yet, because they don't teach you that. And they don't want you to know that stuff, right? They never did, and they still don't. But it wasn't until a few years ago that I really became interested in that as being an ex-Jehovah's Witness. But I ended up getting divorced in 2010, which was ironically something she really didn't technically want to do. I guess she wanted to stay married, but me having never lived a life outside of the organization as a man on my own, that became a real big issue for me. Because in 2004, when we got married, I was still living at home. She was staying with us at me and my parents' house. It wasn't until January of 05 that we started renting our own place. And it wasn't until mid to late 2006 that I really started to think, well, I don't want to rent forever. Let me go ahead and buy a house. So I did that. And I still have the house 18 years later. It's still my house. I ended up bargaining with her her name was on the deed, even though I paid all the mortgage. The loan was in my name. But she said, well, why am I going to live in this house with you if, I don't have any part ownership in it? So I said, okay, let's put her name on the deed too. So they did that in 06. And then in 2012, 2 years after we got divorced, I contacted her. I said, hey, I need to refinance my mortgage. So I need your deed. I need your name off the deed. So we went ahead and did that. And then she said, well, you got to tell me if I'm free to remarry yet, because it was 2 years later and I hadn't told her that yet. So she says, oh, I might be interested in somebody, but I can't pursue this unless you tell me I'm free to. So I went ahead and did that. And that was some years after I wrote my letter of disassociation, that I had to write another letter and say, hey, I've been with someone and she's free to remarry now. So it's all these hoops that you have to jump through for this organization. And yep. I really don't think as a Christian that God would require these types of formalities to happen, especially if you believe in the sacrifice of Jesus and you accept God, God, you're reading the Bible, you want to have a relationship with Him. I don't think you need to be a part of this restrictive organization that forces people to go through these horrible things as they're growing up, just, to please God and to live a life that He requires. So,
Wow.
I mean, and that's, I guess I'll just jump forward a little bit to around 2017 when I was working at UPS. I worked at Amazon for almost 12 years, from 04 until 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I started working at UPS. And it was around that time that I really started to give myself what I thought was a good financial education, which you definitely don't get in the Jehovah's Witness organization. I started to research the monetary system, the history, the fact that gold and silver were money up until 1971. For thousands of years, even in the Bible, it mentions that, gold and silver are money. But, and the United States especially was on a gold standard until 1971. And for 52 years after that, now we've been off the gold standard. And look at all the things that are happening. You have skyrocketing national debt all around the world. You have skyrocketing inflation all around the world. You have stock markets that are hyperinflating in some parts of the world. Currencies are collapsing in a lot of parts of the world. And the fact that we're not using sound money, in my opinion, is the reason why we're seeing a lot of problems around the world. It really has not much to do with the fact that, quote, this is the time of the end, or like the Jehovah's Witnesses say. Because as Rick mentioned on JW World News last night, every generation almost has claimed that, he's the last generation to exist. And they're looking at all the problems in the world to kind of explain that. And yeah, we had problems under a gold standard. I mean, look at the Middle Ages. But I would say that the wealth inequality would be much, much better if we were using sound money today, which we are not. And I think that at some point in the not too far off future, we're going to pay a huge price as a society as a whole for all of the mismanagement of the monetary system that's been happening over the last 52 years, especially the last 52 years, but all throughout the last 100 years, last couple hundred years, or last 1,000 years or more, But yeah, and that's pretty much my story. And I would say the fact that I started to give myself a proper financial education was what really got me in a better place in my life, because the witnesses kind of destroyed my life. So, and when I worked at Amazon, when I first started at Amazon, they gave us a bunch of stocks, and I had a lot of Amazon stock for a few years. And then I started to realize, okay, what am I going to do with these stocks? So I ended up selling them little by little over time. I did make some money on them, obviously, but nothing like I would have made had I held on to them until, let's say 2017, 2018, 2019, somewhere around there. But I started to, along with my research, I discovered cryptocurrencies. And of course, those are speculative assets, but I've done well with them, and I was able to pay my house off. I was able to buy a car over 3 years ago, which I still have. And so I'm completely out of debt, and I'm only 40 years old. I own my house flat out, I own my car flat out. I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have a wife. I don't have any kids. I pretty much have it made as far as I can tell. And other people have told me that too. So I tend to believe it, but it doesn't mean that the challenge is over. I mean, I'm still looking for my next, big thing. I mean, I do house projects all the time. I put $20,000 worth of work into my basement between last year and this year, and I put a new roof on the house. So I poured new front steps just recently. So I'm doing a lot of things to keep myself busy. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much my story, I guess.
Well, it sounds like you're a very intelligent, very responsible, and very practical man to have made the decisions you have had, even though you were brought up in a not the best organization. It's certainly not conducive to you having a brain that you can use like you use yours. Your brain is amazing. And I have to say, I applaud you. You have made really sound, good, solid choices. And that's something that, if the Watchtower had their way, they want you to be dependent on them. Always looking to them. They want to say, that's not putting Jehovah first. And you took your own life into your own hands. And I have to say, I applaud you, Aaron.
Well, thank you. I would also like to say before I forget, the experience that I did mention it last Sunday when before Rick and Susan came on. I was talking to Gilbert very early in the morning. How two things about the memorial 2 weeks ago. So my mom, I hadn't actually talked to her since mid to late 2020 until very recently, right around Memorial time. After my dad died, she would have me help her. First of all, she ended up losing her house because my dad did not have proper, he worked at General Motors for 30 years, from 69 to 99. Yeah, and unfortunately, he didn't really have much to show for it after all of that time, which was one of the reasons, and my parents didn't end up buying their house until 96. And so that was one of the reasons why I decided even back then that I'm not going to have to repeat the same mistake that they did.
Right.
But he didn't have proper insurance, life insurance. So he canceled the policy actually a few months before he died in a tragic accident. He was cutting a tree down and the tree fell on him. And this was, like I said, this was 14 years ago. And so, yeah, that was tragic. I still have the chainsaw that he was using when he was cutting. And my mom said she found him there. He was blue. The chainsaw was still running beside him. So that's just, details. But
that's so sad.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. But after that, my mom decided that she would like to, keep contact with me, and to have me help her fix up her new place that she moved back onto the farm where she grew up and where my grandmother was still there at the time. And so she's still to this day living in the trailer there, another trailer on the farm. And I did a lot of work in the trailer to help fix it up for her over the years. I would say over the course of 10 years, I did a lot of things. But the thing that really pisses me off to this day was the fact that she always had to make it about a, quote, a business transaction. And Rick has talked about this before. She would always either give me money or usually it was giving me money every time I went there. And, I guess I did it over the years because I wanted the money, but it kind of got to a point where she would mention coming, you got to come back, you got to come back, you got to come back. And I would try to explain to her, look, that's not happening. And I would try to be nice about it, but it just got to a point where I didn't feel like having a proper relationship with her was really healthy for me. And I don't really know how else to say that other than that. So the last time she texted me a bunch of stuff and then scriptures and et cetera, I never answered. 2 days after that, she tried to call me. I didn't answer. And then we didn't talk for almost 4 years until recently. And it was Memorial time. Last couple of years, she's had one of the former elders in the congregation reach out to me. And I ended up telling him, please don't contact me anymore because I'm not interested in returning this organization. So then she knew, I guess she figured out at that point that she had to, take matters in her own hands. So so all of a sudden she called me out of the blue. One night about 2 weeks ago, I didn't answer. She didn't leave a message. She didn't text either. So I said, I'm going to let this ride for a little bit and see how it goes. And so she calls again. I don't answer, no text, no nothing, no reason for her reaching out, right? So then a few days later, she tries again. And I don't answer, but I decide, well, I got to do something about this. So I said, I'm going to think about what I'm going to say, and I'm going to text it to her. So I did that. And one of the things that I said in the text was, I said, I've had suspicions that the reason you reached out right now is to try to get me to the memorial. And I said, I'm not going to that. And I said, no, I'm not changing my stance on returning to the organization. I said, I respect your decision to remain a member. And so that's among other, I said some other stuff too, but that's really not important. What's important is the fact that she did not say, oh, you know, son, I love you, and let's put the past behind us, and, you know, let's try to work on our relationship. I don't care what the organization stance on it is. I'm not going to. She never said that. And she didn't say that this time either. So, because of that, I had to guess the reason why she was reaching out to me. And so, and get her response really kind of, you know, drives it home, in my opinion. She says, actually, I was going to ask you to attend the special talk tomorrow, which was, you know, I guess, on March the 18th. So the fact that I said, I'm not returning to the organization, I haven't changed my stance, she completely glossed over that, didn't mention it at all. Did not say, oh, I respect that, Aaron, I love you, et cetera, nothing. This is what happens to people. This is what this organization, what the governing body is doing to these people. It's not God, it's not the Bible, it's the governing body that's doing that to these people. It has to be. What else could it be, right? So, yeah, and after that, we just kind of went back and forth, and she said that there are several brothers in the congregation now wearing beards, of course, and she says, I haven't worn split pants yet, but I will sometime. And then, you know, I just kind of went through the history as to why they had banned beards from when the time Rutherford took over, and it was because he didn't want to be identified as the same as Russell. He wanted to do things differently. So she didn't you know, give a response to that. She's just like, oh, Joe's organization is keeping up with the chariot, but this is just you know, indoctrination that most witnesses will say, and because that's what they're being told to say, right? And there's a second person recently that said that. So I'm a Lyft driver now. That's all I do. And so that way I can make my own hours. I can drive when I want. I can make as little money or as much money as I want. I mean, I've made $1,200 in 1 week before doing Lyft. So the potential is there. But on Memorial Night, so ironically, I get a ride request from the Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses. I kid you not, this is what happened. It wasn't anyone that I knew in the past. It was just an older sister who, I guess she just needed a ride home. So she called a Lyft. And so when I got there, I was waiting for her. She got in the car. And so she said, we got to talking, and she was like, yeah, you know, we had a memorial tonight. And I said, oh, yeah, I'm familiar with that. And she's like, oh, you know, are you studying or something like that? I said, well, I tried to dance around this. I didn't want to come right out and say, oh, I'm an ex-witness, but I just said, well, I'm a person who keeps up with what's going on in the organization. That's how I put it. So, you know, and during that conversation, we talked about many things, but one of the things that she said was that exact same quote that my mother said: Jehovah's Witnesses keeping up with Jehovah's chariot. You can't make this stuff up. You can't make it up.
They're all programmed. They're all programmed Watchtower drones, and you can tell by the way they talk, the words they use, the phrases they use, the intonation that they use. They're all spouting the same programmed Watchtower rhetoric. And it kind of makes you laugh. Like, that is so sad.
Yep. And I guess one of the last things I'll say is I've only recently rediscovered the 6 screens, but I have had Rick's his judicial committee that he recorded since at least 2005, because I remember I had it on my PC at home, and I had gotten it from somewhere online. Maybe it was on the 6 Screens website or something. I don't remember where I got it. I got it from somewhere. Or maybe it was even on his YouTube channel, because I know he had a YouTube channel for even way back. YouTube started in 2005, so, I mean, Rick might have been one of the first YouTubers. I don't even know. But I think my dad had found out that I had that, and he wasn't too happy about the fact that I was listening to that. But I just want to say that, I really appreciate that Rick has been at this for 20 years and trying to wake people up. And this is the OG program. So I'm, like I said, I'm happy to be here too.
Well, we are very happy to have you on the show, Aaron. This is a special show that our brother Rick has set aside every other Sunday to have just one person like you, sometimes a couple, but usually it's just one person, to just have the time to tell their story in their own way, at their own pace, sharing what they want, skipping over what they don't want to share. And I think it's a really nice opportunity that Rick offers, because sometimes we don't really realize just how much we have been through, what we have, traversed through, how far we've come until we start to tell our story. Because as we walk ourselves through the years, telling our story to our listeners, it's like, wow, I really went through that. I had to deal with that. And as your mother goes, I hope you don't mind me commenting, but I have a very strong feeling that your mother loves you dearly, but she is so trapped by her belief in her programming that you're the wicked apostate who turned your back on Jehovah. So the only way she can talk to you is within the rules, the very strict parameter of rules that Watchtower sets up, which is business only, family business only. So she can call you and ask you to fix this or that and pay you. That's family business. Oh, you're not discussing spiritual things. They want to make sure you can't contaminate her with any truth that you learn, that you could share her to show her that the Watchtower is a tyrannical dictatorship, mind control cult. But it's like, oh, now I can invite him to the memorial. And she wants to reach out in love, but she's not going to say what she wants to say because Watchtower doesn't give her permission. But I just wanted to throw that in because my mom's the same way. Every once in a while it slips how much she loves me, but I'm a wicked apostate,
Right. And I don't even know if she's aware that I'm would be classified as an apostate. I suppose I would be because I'm helping to try to wake other people up. But it's just interesting that I seem to know more about the organization, or we as apostates know more about the organization than a lot of them do. I mean, I bet that she wasn't even. I even asked her in that text that night, and that was the last time I talked to her since last 2 weeks. But I said, how many of the governing body members do you know? How many can you name? I ask witnesses this whenever I get the chance and whenever I think about it. Yeah. And a lot of them probably couldn't name all of them, and especially about the fact that Tony Morris was removed. That was one of the things I talked about in the car with the sister I picked up. And she seemed to want to argue with me about the fact that he was removed. And she was like, oh, she was trying to dance around, and she was like, oh, he's still a witness. I was like, yeah, no, I'm not trying to dispute the fact that he's still a witness, but I said he was removed from the governing body so that they could put 2 new members on there that could, in fact, affect all these changes that they've been happening. And the fact that people can't see that, or they don't want to see it, is just, it's mind-boggling.
Well, they don't want to trick in any way the Watchtower fantasy bubble that they hide their little mind in. Don't think for yourself. They want to stay in their programming. And it's just like a glitch. Anything that, it's like the old pinball machines. I don't know if you've ever played pinball on an old pinball machine, but there's a point where the pinball machine gets overwhelmed and then you see tilt, tilt, tilt. It's like, you have to kind of almost reprogram it. They can't take anything that disrupts the flow of their indoctrination, of their programming. They have to stay in their programming. It's like we used to say in the 90s and early 2000s, they've been absorbed. They've been assimilated into the hive mind. They are all part of the Borg. And that's why, like you brought out, they all talk the same. They have the same expressions, the same answers with the same words and expressions to specific questions. And that's why so many people who are awake like you are, Aaron, just almost like beating your head into a wall. How do you get these people to wake up? How can they see all this going on and they still like, oh, we have to stay with Jehovah's chariot. Oh, they're coming in by leaps and bounds. Oh, the governing body knows what they're doing. Oh, Armageddon is so close. Oh, we have to stay close to Jehovah's organization. They have an answer for everything. Their house is burning down to the ground. They're starving. They're being ripped off. Oh, but we must be faithful. Does it ever just make you want to scream?
Yeah, it reminds me of the picture that they post on Twitter a lot, and it's there's a burning building in the background, and then there's whatever image that they want to superimpose in the front of it, and the bubble that they're speaking is nothing to see here. Move along, folks.
Yep, there's nothing to see here. I love that. I saw a picture. It was a one-picture cartoon on the internet one day, and it was all a cartoon, and it was like two movie theaters, and one had a line from the kiosk in front of the theater all down the street and all around the block, and it was something about, the fantasy, the lie and the fantasy, and everybody was lined up, and the kiosk right next to it was to a theater that was telling the truth. There were like 4 people waiting to get their ticket. It's sad. It's a matter of choice. A lot of people, just like the Bible says, they just want their ears tickled. They just want to hear what they want to hear. And if you try to show them anything that's the truth, they're like the little 2-year-olds holding their hands over their over their eyes. You can't see me. You can't see me. I can't hear you. Yeah, well, it's just so sad, but there's nothing you can do. We never know. Randall Waters said it so well. He said, nobody knows a person's time. They could start waking up tomorrow. That's why I worry about the PIMQs, because if you're physically in and mentally in, your PMEs, you're going to be loyal no matter what. But maybe there will be a point where something hits you in the head. You hear something, you read something, you see something on TV, you'll overhear something that somebody said, and it'll kind of get in that brain and maybe be a seed. But there will be a point where they're no longer PME, just blindly believing, just blindly excusing. Oh, well, it's just, imperfect men. This is Jehovah's organization. I have to be faithful. But when you become a PIMQ, you're physically in. You still believe. You're faithful. But mentally, you're starting to question. They're like, what? This just doesn't feel right. Or it didn't used to be like this. Like Rick says all the time, this is not your grandfather's organization. It is crazy. But in the PIMQ stage, you start to get these questions. You start to want to know why. And then you realize, I can't ask these questions. I'll get in trouble. Oh, it's Satan. Satan's trying to make me leave. So it's a very precarious, fragile, very scary place to be, because you almost want to run back to what feels comfortable, being the PME, physically in, mentally in. But the PIMQ stages are the ones that I worry about, and those are the ones that I am hoping, Aaron, will stumble upon the 6 screens and stumble upon the show. Ex-Jehovah's Witnesses share their Watchtower story, because that might really get them, and they'll click on you. And everything you say, they will be able to relate to, even if it might take them a long time to wake up, or maybe they'll wake up tomorrow. You never know. But once your mind really gets it, like you, Aaron, once you know for a fact that this organization cannot be God's anything, because the evidence shows it can't be. They have no freedom, for one thing. 2 Corinthians 3:17 says that where Jehovah's Spirit is, there's freedom. Well, because there's no freedom at all in Watchtower, you can't even ask an elder, what's all this about? We were hearing about predators and sexual predators and pedophiles in the organization. Is that true? You can't even ask that question to a friend, a close personal friend who brought you into the organization, who is now a circuit overseer. Now you're shunned because you asked a question. So that can't possibly be any sign of any kind of freedom. So if there's no freedom, according to 2 Corinthians 3:17, that means Jehovah's Spirit is not with Watchtower. And if the Watchtower was truly God's organization, wouldn't you think that they would have Holy Spirit? On one hand, the governing body says we're not inspired. We're just doing the best we can. We're still stumbling about. But on the other hand, they say, oh, Jesus and Jehovah trust the governing body. They trust the faithful slave. They talk out of both sides of their mouth. Excuse me, Aaron. This is your show.
No, I agree. Yeah, I totally agree. They're hypocritical in a lot of ways. I mean, look at like one of the rolling things that rolls across the thing on top of above Rick's head. It says who owns Watchtower stock, and how many members own private real estate like Stephen Lett does, and those kind of things. I mean, and not only that, but who's the head of the governing body? Because everybody answers to someone, and yeah, that's something to think about too, I think.
Well, the big bosses, we all know now, the big bosses, they're all in Pennsylvania. The governing body in New York, they're just the puppets. They get paid well to be the face of Jehovah's organization, but it's all a big scam. I mean, just look at Jason Zelda's videos on YouTube. Anybody who doesn't want to know anything, look up Jason Zelda with a Z and scroll down all of his videos. Look for the one hidden from Jehovah's Witnesses, the smoking gun. And you click on that and he just brings out, it's one thing to say this, that, and I know this and that, but to have actual hard copy proof of all of their tax returns, all of their holdings, all of the stocks, thousands and thousands of shares in stocks, and not just any stocks. There's stocks that we wouldn't be allowed to own stock in, like cigarette companies, tobacco companies, bomber companies that make bombs and bombers. Oh, my. Oh, but we're not supposed to know that.
Right. Yeah, all the defense contractors, Lockheed Martin, they probably got that.
Thank you. Yes, they do. So we're getting near the end of the show, my brother Aaron. You made time fly, but I just want to know if you would be willing to allow someone to come on in case there's someone that has a question or a comment. Would that be all right with you?
Yeah, sure. I was thinking there might have been more time for questions, but yeah, it's hard for me to believe it's 3:00 already too. But yeah, any questions that anybody wants or might have, sure.
Oh, thank you, Aaron. Anyone want to speak to Aaron? Questions? Start it.
I have a question.
Hello,
Sure.
my sister.
Hi. This is Susan. This is Rick's wife. I wanted to ask, because my girls are about your age, and I haven't talked to them in 10 years, and I do miss them terribly, but I also don't involve myself or insert myself in their lives because they don't seem to really want that. And I'm just hoping they'll be like you, because they're about your age, that they would wake up. But my question is, do you notice, now that you've been away from the Kingdom Hall somewhat, do you notice that maybe the witnesses look like a little bit like zombies? Like they just, when they're in the Kingdom Hall, they just don't look awake? Like there's some kind of a mind control going on?
Yeah. Well, it's hard for me to really say, but because I mean, I haven't been to a Kingdom Hall in years now, but I've seen witnesses out doing cart work. Matter of fact, at a park near my house, at least up until last fall time frame, they were coming out to the park literally every Thursday on the dot. And it really started to kind of tick me off, because it made me almost want to figure out a way to get them out of there, do a protest or something. But I stopped and talked to them for a little bit one day and told them a little bit of what was on my mind and all that. And that was actually before, Tony Marks was removed and all these changes happened. But a lot of them, they did look like they were just going through the motions. I mean, people, they wouldn't really go up and talk to people out there on the pier near the park. They would wait for people to come to them, and that's the opposite of what happened as I was growing up in the witnesses, and I'm sure as you obviously had been aware of too when you were in the organization. And it's just so different now. It's crazy.
So do you think the ones that are even up doing the cart witnessing, do you think they're just, well, now they don't have to count time anymore, so field service must be almost zero, but back then, did they seem like they were just trying to get their time in, or they didn't really care? Or maybe they did care, because some do. They have, just a pat answer when you bring up certain questions. They just, it's just the same crazy answer that makes no sense. And they don't want to hear any kind of negativity towards the Watchtower Society at all. They seem that if you want to get them angry, you just have to mention something like that, especially against the governing body. They don't like it.
Right. That's absolutely true. Yeah. And it'll be interesting now to see if they still come out there every Thursday, so, when the spring, because it's springtime now. So as it starts getting warmer out, I'm really going to take note, and maybe I can report back.
Yeah, I'd like to know myself. Maybe you could talk to Rick and, give them the information so we could know how interested they are in field service now that they don't have to report time. Unless they're a pioneer, right?
Yeah, they could have been. I don't really remember, but yeah, it's more than possible.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your story. It was just, the hour did go fast, and you have a very interesting story. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Susan.
Well, Aaron, this is Rick. I've been listening here. My goodness gracious, you kept. I'm sorry. Okay, because someone else want to come on. Go ahead. Okay, well, let me talk until they do come on. But anyways,
Sorry, Red.
Oh, okay, Anne-Marie, I didn't know that was you. But anyways, Aaron, you are a responsible young person. This is very unusual. For a person coming out of the Watchtower, generally speaking, they go in a direction that makes them not totally. Growing up in the Watchtower can really mess you up. But it seems like you got pretty much unscathed by it. You got out. You're a reasonable person today. You own your own home. Your car's paid for. You got a good job. You love getting up and going to work. I can just tell. No one has to shake you out of bed and get you moving. I can tell. So,
right.
Well,
yeah. It wasn't always that way, though. And, it was only until recently that I decided to quit my job of 4 years at a cold refrigerated warehouse, because that might have been the low point for me. And I was not knowing what to do from day to day because I couldn't stand to go in there anymore. And I was in a situation where my boss was my friend. So then I had that, like I said, how am I going to handle this? But one day I couldn't take it anymore, because a lot of people listening, and then they have warehouse jobs or, jobs that they work for companies that can relate. And it's all different kind of companies today. They're working you to the bone. They're not paying people what they're worth. And they want less. They want more and more production, more and more numbers out of people, and for less and less pay, or whatever less pay they can get away with paying people. And it's just the cost of living is skyrocketing, and people are starting to not be able to make ends meet. And that wasn't the case with me. My case was the fact that I just wasn't happy. So I took a leap of faith, so to speak, and went for doing Lyft, and I love it so far. Now the only thing I'm gonna have to worry about is tax when tax time comes around. But I'm tracking my miles, so we'll see how it goes.
In fact, that's the one thing. You'll have tremendous amounts of tax deductions. Driving for Lyft, for Uber, you keep track of those mileage. Well, what can you get now per mileage? What's it, about 56 cents or so per mile? Somewhere around there, right?
Oh, yeah, it's up there. It might even be cents.
Oh, is it higher now? Yeah,
something
no.
like that.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, I'm getting ready to do my taxes too, and I haven't checked the mileage. But yeah, no, you take advantage of that. But no, that you're a responsible person. I can see it. I've talked to a lot of young people, and you're still a young man in my book. You could be my son, really. But I think it's amazing what you've accomplished in life. You've gone beyond what a lot of ex-witnesses or even Jehovah's Witnesses would go beyond. You took this very seriously, and you know you're very. You're an astute person too. I listen in, and you command you have a good command of the language. You're very articulate in a sense that you get the message across without saying a whole lot. You I like that. That's a good quality, Aaron. So you know now
Thanks.
I'm just curious now. I'm just curious, just thinking out loud here more than anything. Uh, you probably someday will want to get married again. I would think, maybe I don't know, but.
If the right opportunity comes along, sure, I think I'd be open to it. Yeah.
Because I was thinking, you know, would you be more inclined to want to get involved with an ex Jehovah's Witness woman or no?
Well, that's kind of what I called into Dick and Connie's show one evening, and that's kind of what he recommended and what they recommended. So, yeah, if I can find an ex witness that I get along with, sure, yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, that's I got thinking that because I'm thinking, wow, you know, here's a good guy. He's on the ball. I would think that someone that has left the Watchtower and is in a position of looking for someone, I would say, wow, there's a right pick right there. Seriously. So we've had other people on the network here that have actually met each other. But I'm just thinking, boy, here's a man here because life is lonely. It must be lonely going home to your home and not. It probably brings back memories of years ago, but like you say, you're pretty content and what have you. But what amazed me too is the relationship you were talking about with your father. Now, I didn't get it, but was he a staunch Jehovah's Witness, a strict witness?
I would say they were. Yeah, I mean, he was strict, but they both were, and they were like the dynamic duo when it comes to sheltering their kids, and I was very sheltered in a lot of ways, only associating with other young witness youths and everything. But yeah, and I didn't even get to the part where I got baptized when I was 16, so that was a lot of peer pressure involved there. And like I said, I didn't really want to. I never wanted to. I just did it because I thought that's what all the other young people are doing.
But boy, even as a younger person, you could see through this whole charade. Good for you. And I'm sorry to hear about your father too. That was a tragic situation. My goodness gracious. Is your mother remarried? Is your mother remarried today?
No, I don't think she's even had any relationship. She's probably still clinging on to the hope that the new system is going to come and she's going to get to see him again. So
yeah,
I mean, I feel bad for her in that respect, but she needs to do the research behind the history of this organization and discover the truth.
Yeah, and then also what got me really thinking too is you had I mean, how many people would have loved to have been driving a Lyft and pick a Jehovah's Witness up at the memorial? That was a golden opportunity. That was wonderful. But you had to restrain yourself. You couldn't come out and say, "Hey, I'm an apostate from Delaware." You had to be kind of careful, you know.
Right.
Well, good for you. That was a good story. I enjoyed that. And I'm sure that happens a lot. I'm sure. I mean, have you picked other witnesses up in your Lyft business?
None that have actually come out and said, I'm a witness. But that was the only Kingdom Hall pickup that I had so far.
Well, I'm thinking if there's Jehovah's Witnesses that do Lyft or Uber and they have that job, they use that as a great preaching frontier. I bet you. I bet you they take full advantage of it.
Maybe. But I think you got to be careful doing that because at the end of every ride, the customer can rate their ride experience. So if they feel like the driver was, doing things that they shouldn't have been, or trying to push them in, a certain direction like that could cause them to flag the driver. And if that happens too many times, the driver can get removed. So would like to think that the witnesses, if they are doing that, they would show restraint. That's their job.
Yeah. But some of them go above and beyond their line of duty. But they would. I mean, I would do it if I got into a Lyft or an Uber, and all of a sudden a witness started, really pushing the truth at me. I mean, I would have to, flag that person and say, hey, don't, this guy shouldn't be doing this. So I hope they're smart enough not to do it. Well, thank you, Aaron, for wanting to come on and being on the program today. And thank you for being patient. I know we had to cancel the last time out, but you're a man of your word. And thank you for coming on today, Aaron. We appreciate it.
All right. I was happy to do it.
Back to you, Emery.
Thank you, my brother Rick. Isn't he great, Aaron? So is there anything you would like to add? I really appreciate the things that you also brought out when you were talking to Rick. Every detail adds to the flair of the story. It makes it more interesting. And I'm just picturing you picking up that older sister from the memorial. Oh, that must have been interesting.
It just really threw me for a loop. And I was like, at the time, I was like, I can't believe this is really happening. And not only that, but in the live chat last Sunday night, last Saturday night, early Sunday morning, the people were saying when I was talking about this, they brought out a really good point, and they were like, "What's a sister doing getting in a car with a man alone?" Like that. But I just said, well, maybe that was her only option.
Right. They get on you for anything and everything, and I'm glad the commenters brought that out. Yeah, I've heard of that. An older sister getting help from a younger brother, and they tried to make something sexual out of it, like the guy was just bringing her food or something.
Yeah.
It's a shame. Well, is there anything that you would like to add, dear? And we are at near the end of the show, but again, this is your time that Rick has set aside for you. And I want you to know we have been very interested in listening to your story. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with, dear?
Well, I mean, I know that making decisions in your life can be difficult. Hard decisions, like if you're PMO and you don't want to lose the friends that you have in the organization. Well, I can understand that, but I mean, I've been there. I mean, I didn't have a lot of friends except people that I was working with, that I hung out with sometimes. In a lot of ways, I still struggle with that social aspect in my life, but it certainly has improved a lot, especially in the last couple of years. And I've worked at it. I don't do dating apps because I think they're mainly scams, because there's a lot of bots on there and everything. And even on those apps, you can go on for purposes of just getting friends and things like that. But I feel like it's best to meet, if you need to meet people, let's try to do it in real life. And I met some really cool people in real life, and especially my friend Bob, who I met at a park a couple years ago. We hang out sometimes, and I do some jobs with him sometimes, and we hang out sometimes. So then I got introduced to his family through him, and they're nice people, and so it's really, anything can be done if you really want to put your mind to it and say, I want to live a better life.
It sounds like you're a very sensible man. Take it as it comes. I agree with you about any kind of dating app. It's better to meet a person face to face. You can see who they are. You can look into their eyes and get a sense of, is this person a fake? Are they a scammer? Are they a manipulator? Do they have mental issues? Are they just abusive? Whatever. You don't want anybody who sees you as somebody to use. Go ahead.
Right. And I would also say, don't be afraid to cut people out of your life that you feel might be, hindering it or put you in jeopardy. Like I had a friend named Cindy who also is an ex-Jehovah's Witness. And she was in the hall years ago, and her and my ex-wife were friends for a while, but she left, and then I left, and then we started to hang out sometimes. But unfortunately, she was never able to get her family problems. She was never able to keep her family problems from interfering with her relationship with her friends. And it got to a point where every time I talked to her, even up until recently, she would always mention the same things about this guy that she was with who was in prison for a while. And even during that time, I would go over to her house and hang out with her and her kids. We would talk, and I wouldn't come right out and say it, but I would try to say, well, you know, is getting back together with this guy something that you think really is good for you, if that's something you really want to do when he gets out of prison? And well, long story short, she ended up doing that. And she's older than me. She's like 45, 46. And she ended up having another kid when she was like 41, 42, maybe even older than, maybe 43. I don't know how old her latest kid is, but her son is like 20. No, I think he's 30 now. She had him when she was 16. So I told her, well, most recently I had to block her because she just kept going on and on and on about things I told her not to. But the point is, I had to cut her off. Like, I can't deal with that toxic people in my life, you know, and I don't think anyone else should either.
No, you shouldn't. You should do what's best for you and not feel that you have to explain or apologize for saying, you know, I need to draw the line. Enough is enough. Good for you. That's a very good thing that you have on your show, so people can hear that. I always try to encourage people to make sure they set personal boundaries. You can't look to others to set your boundaries. You have to decide what's okay with you, what's not okay, what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with, and so on. And when you are clear with your personal boundaries, then you make sure that others know where the boundaries are, and you did it. And good for you, because you're not responsible for other people's issues. I tell my adopted son all the time, you have to be cognizant of where your responsibility ends and the other person's responsibility begins, because sadly in Watchtower, we were so confused over what we really were responsible for, made to feel guilty and bad about ourselves. Everything was our fault. If somebody was mad at us, it was our fault. You know, we didn't say, wait a minute, you don't have no right to be in my business. You know, we weren't taught to be able to stand up for ourselves. I think you are a wonderful example of being mentally and emotionally healthy and fiscally and otherwise very smart in your choices. I'm very thankful you came on today, Aaron.
Yeah, me as well, Anne-Marie. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone who was listening today and everyone listening later in the archives. We especially want to thank our dear brother Rick for faithfully providing this platform every other Sunday, Six Screens Sunday, where we do talk about spiritual things in our trek on the Watchtower. And a big shout out, thank you for our dear Susan, Rick's precious wife, and who still is sweet and full of love. And we want to thank our special guest, Aaron. Thank you so much, Aaron. We want to thank everybody for coming in today. Today is April 7th, 2024. The show is Ex-Jehovah's Witnesses Tell Their Watchtower Story. And now it's time to go to Rick and JW World News Sunday Edition.
Well, there you have it, Anne-Marie. I have to tell you, I really enjoyed that. I like Aaron. Boy, he is on the ball. I like people on the ball, Anne-Marie. I have to tell you, a lot of people in this world that we're living in are losing it. But here's a man, he's not losing it. Aaron is, he's sharp. He's going to go forward. He's going to do very well in life. So I'm so glad he could come on. I thank him for doing that. Well, don't anyone go anywhere. This is a Sunday afternoon, and we have more programming coming up. Coming up next, JW World News Sunday Edition. Yeah, that's up next. And then, of course, at 4 o'clock, we do the Christian Court. Now, don't run for the mountains. I know people hear the word Christian. I'm getting out of here. These guys are going to preach to me. We're not going to preach to you. I mean, you might find it fascinating. In the world of Christianity, at times there's questions that come up that Christians would like to have answered. Sometimes these questions are peculiar, but don't you worry. We'll answer some of these questions today on the court. So that comes up at 4. And then at 5 o'clock, you must have Bible questions. If you left the Watchtower and you went there to learn about God, you must have some Bible questions. So Jay Hess, he at one time was associated with the Watchtower writing department. And he's coming on at 5 o'clock and he's going to answer your questions. So join us then. But we're going to go to JW World News next, right on this YouTube channel. Don't go anywhere because we'll be right back. And all those listening in on Facebook, we're on a number of Facebook platforms. But please, I know you're probably saying, Rick, you ignore me in here. I can only see, one thing at a time. But I know you're on there, and I appreciate all those that listen in on Facebook. Thank you. So we'll end the program here. JW World News coming up next.